when you grow up in a system, sort of immersed in the system, you have a tendency to look at the facts of the world with the system instead of stepping out and looking at the system itself. If you don't mind your P's and Q's, that leads you right into schizophrenic kind of life, which we saw just this last year with all the school board protests, right? With critical theories being taught in the schools and how dare you teach our kids socialism. The public schools are socialism. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So when irate parents go into a school board meeting and say, how dare you teach socialism in the public schools? It's like saying, how dare you teach socialism in the socialist schools? I just don't, and that's a good example of how people don't step back and view the whole shebang. They don't look at the whole operation. So public schools have been a vehicle for the inculcation of radicalism from the beginning. And
this is not something brand new.
It's not something brand new.
13.
Right. Now, there was an optical illusion. There was admittedly an optical illusion. When, in the 19th century, when the Roman Catholic immigration began in earnest to the United States, the Irish and others like that, the Catholic Church founded or established their parochial school system. But they didn't do it because the government schools were secular nightmares. They did it because the public schools were Protestant and evangelical.
Nightmares.
Right. Yeah. And well, at the time there was a rigorous education, but the public schools had catechisms, Protestant catechisms, prayers in the schools, and the King James Bible. So in the 19th century, when Dabney said Christians then must prepare themselves for the following results, all Bibles, catechisms, and prayers will be driven out of the schools. Now, I still remember being led in prayer in the government school by a teacher. We still prayed when I prayed in government schools when I was a kid, and that was the last of the things to go. We look at it, and even the diehard conservative traditionalists who want to save the public schools say that there were catechisms in the schools, right? Well, the Roman Catholics went and formed their own parochial school system because the public schools were so Protestant. But that was a function of schools being under the control of local school boards. The schools were Protestant and evangelical because all the communities were. Right. But the masterminds behind the whole government school program, the Horace Manns, people like that, they were Unitarian, not Orthodox, and they were playing the long game. And they played the long game very successfully, such that conservative Christian parents still think of the public school that their great-grandfather went to as, quote-unquote, our schools. There's the illusion of local control. And 100 years ago, there was local control, but now there isn't.
Yeah. Maybe you mentioned Horace Mann, John Dewey comes to mind. Mm-hmm. When you say they were playing the long game, what was the contents of their long game, if that makes sense?
What do they want?
Yeah, well, basically, the problem goes back to Socrates. Okay?
Let's go.
Why not? So if you're a humanist, basically, then you believe that mankind is basically good. But if mankind, because if you're not taking God into account, and you're beginning and ending with man, Protagoras is man is the measure of all things. If you're humanistically centered, here's your dilemma. If man is basically good, why does he keep doing all these awful things? Right? It's hard to maintain the essential goodness of man when the bodies keep piling up and when all the atrocities happen. And so this was a problem that Socrates sought to answer. So if man is basically good, then why does he do evil? Well, the answer has to be ignorance. That was the answer that Socrates came up with. Man does evil because he's uninformed, uneducated, ignorant. And so if ignorance is the problem, if the quote-unquote sin problem is ignorance, then the Savior is education. Okay? So from the beginning, this is the messianic impulse of the early American educators. They wanted to usher in a utopia. They wanted to usher in a world that's free of disease and bigotry and ignorance and stuff, and they wanted to do it by means of teaching the truth, their version of the truth, because education is their Savior. For Christians, education is not our Savior. Christ is our Savior. But education is one of the things that needs to be saved.
Watch the full interview now, only on Canon Plus.